G'day, Lockie here. Today we're going to take a look at a project called Gatekeeper. Gatekeeper can be found under the Open Policy Agent organization in GitHub, and Open Policy Agent is actually a sandbox CNCF project. So go over to Open Policy Agent / Gatekeeper to take a look. Now, what is Gatekeeper? Gatekeeper is a policy controller for Kubernetes. Now, why would you actually want policy in Kubernetes? Well, Gatekeeper allows you to create policy using Open Policy Agent based on Rego, so define actually declarative policy and express that policy in Kubernetes at resource create or update time. So for example, you might want all your pods in a given cluster to only pull containers from a specific container registry. So you could enforce that at create time and say, hey, if you're not coming from this registry, then I'm not going to allow it. Or you could actually say modify it to another specific registry. Conflicting hosts and ingresses, standard labels that your company might have, and in addition to admission, there's also an audit. So you could also, there's an audit endpoint in Gatekeeper to say, based on these policies, what is actually in compliance based on those policies and what is out of compliance. So that's a great way to kind of do some recon as you're implementing policies. Now this all is underpinned using admission webhook controllers in Kubernetes. So it's kind of bundled up as a mutating webhook configuration here. So if you want to learn more, you can go take a look. They've got a Slack channel on the OPA Slack. There's a weekly meeting and you can file issues. Now I'm going to go through this very quickly and show you just a couple of use cases. I will show you what I have here. So I have a 13.3 cluster and it should be fairly clean. Get pods. And we have okay, so it's just an empty cluster here running. I'm going to run the deploy all script. Let's take a look at what that does. Creates a namespace, some cluster roles and cluster role bindings, some roles, a service, a stateful set, a secret, and a config map. So if I go and do a get pods, let's take a look at services. Let's make sure we got an endpoint in the namespace Gatekeeper system. Okay, we can see we've got controller manager with 3 containers in that pod. We got a service and we have an endpoint attached to that service. And I would hazard a guess, mutating webhook. This is a tough one for those trying to follow at home. Okay, so we have a mutating web configuration. So let's take a look at what that's doing. And it's passing any create or update on any API version, any API group, and any resource, so anything that's created or updated into this service in this namespace at this path. And it's given it a name called mutation.styro.com. And okay, cool. It looks like there's some match. Okay, so namespace selector if this key does not exist. Okay, just a little background there. Let's get into the demo. Okay, so scenarios. Well, let's take a look at a validation scenario. Well, what we're going to do is we actually have this policy in this file. We're going to create a config map and call it example in that namespace. So Gatekeeper will actually look for policy in that namespace. Okay, and let's go and take a look at what that policy looks like. It was actually called host FQDN. Okay, so ingress host names must be whitelisted on a namespace. Let's go back and take a look at our example. So we're going to create a namespace called QA. That's done. And we're going to apply this thing called ingress bad. Okay, so we can see that that web mutation webhook configuration that was called mutation.styro.com is denied it, saying it's an invalid request, and that's the actual, looks like the ingress host name that we've given. Let's go and confirm that that is indeed true. Bad. Okay. So there's also an OK here as well, which has a sign in. I would guess, because it needs to be whitelisted, that even if I try and apply the OK, it will not work. Or is it just OK.yaml? Okay, yeah, so that's indeed correct. Let's just go take a look at how this works. So deny resolution, that's what matches valid ingress host. Okay, so here's the whitelist. Namespaces, metadata, annotation. So anything with this annotation. We're going to split on that. Okay, and hosts. All right, so I would guess that I can dynamically reconfigure this namespace called QA. We could run an annotate command here as well, but let's just do it this way. Annotations, and we're going to give it the annotation, and we're going to set it to signin.qa.acmecorp.com, I believe. We're going to edit that, so now that has the annotation. We're going to go back and try and do a create. Okay, so it created this time. Now that's super cool because I've dynamically changed the policy and it's changed the behavior of Gatekeeper. So based on that policy, I can actually dynamically change that behavior, which is very cool. Most mutating webhook controllers that I've seen are actually statically compiled, which means you can't apply policy. Now they're using the OPA policy engine as well in here, which is also very cool, which means I have a standard open source way in the CNC you have to actually express policy. Very cool. So we've done the validation. Let's take a look at mutation. Okay, so this policy will mutate resources and define. Okay, so if we have an annotation called test mutation, the resources will be updated with foo_bar. Okay, so let me actually take a look at that. So I've created that policy. Let's go over and just take a look at what that does. Annotate. Okay, so anything that has this annotation, test mutation, then I'm going to do an op-add at this path, foo=bar. Okay, we can do that. So we're going to do a nginx deployment, and we should end up with an nginx. And we do, it's on the way. What are we going to do here? Look at the metadata. Okay, and in the annotations, there's nothing. We are now going to annotate that with test mutation equals true. Okay, so voila, we should see, if I do this again, test mutation is there and foo=bar is there. So we've set up kind of a conditional mutation on this, then do this. That is also very, very cool. Now, okay, there's also an authorization scenario as well that I'm not going to go into in this video, but you can actually see the power of something like Gatekeeper to express policy in a standardized way and have it dynamically configurable using config maps, which I think is also very cool. Very excited for this project. Kudos to the folks in the community that are working on it. And I'm excited to see where this goes. Thanks for joining, and feel free to take a look at Gatekeeper. Cheers.